Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card-holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivan Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Architect, Cool Stuff Inc., and Quiver Time. Today, I have a very special guest because I put out a call and I was like, I want to talk to a pro. I want to talk to somebody who is very much the antithesis of the way I play Magic, and also just like I want to learn how people learn to be better players, because I don't know if you guys know anything about me. I'm the most casual scrub there's ever scrubbed a casual, and the irony is I'm actually very good at playing Magic. I just don't apply myself because that's not the kind of Magic I want to play. But it gets surprised when like I actually play against people at like tournaments or not tournaments, but like, you know, events and stuff. And they're like, wow, you're better than I thought you were. And I'm like, well, I do know my way around a card after 30 years. It's like,
Yeah.
So Mason Clark has joined me today. Hello, Mason. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to come on the show and get to talk to you. It's going to be a fun experience, and it really is sort of the antithesis of what casual Magic typically is.
Well, luckily, the show is more about talking Magic casually as opposed to being like real scrub tier. But the thing is, the reason I want you on is because I've heard your name floated around a lot. Like, I know you've been playing in like tournaments and grinding for a long time, but as of like the past year or so, it feels like a lot of my friends have been going to you for coaching, and that's the thing that I've seen a lot of like pros do, but it's just such a wild idea to me because I'm like, how do you get coached in Magic? And so I thought it would be really interesting to talk to somebody who actually does this and to learn kind of what is it that you're looking for? How do you take a player and make them a better player? Like that seems to be a really challenging art to me.
Yeah, it is definitely a lot of work. And I think that is one big thing is that, I don't want to disparage anyone who's done in the past, but I've coached a lot of people now. And a lot of people have talked about how they got coaching in the past. And a thing that people did, I think in like early 2015, late 2016, is they say, hey, let's do coaching. And they would play a Moto League with somebody and they would like kind of tell them the plays. And I really see myself not as a coach, but as like a personal trainer or a tutor. Like my thoughts on it is I can give you the tools to succeed like a personal trainer. I can help you sort of solve things, and I can teach you the way that a lot of people go about solving these problems like a tutor can. And I sort of approached coaching from that direction, right? So imagine if you would, like you have children, if you hired a math tutor and I was your tutor and I came into the kid and I was like 8, 9, 24, 64, 8, 12. I put it on the paper and I left, right? Took my $100. You would be like, oh, like, what just happened?
What just happened?
Yeah.
It's ironic. I mean, that's exactly what I used to think, because I remember there was a lot of pros, especially during the early part of lockdown and stuff, who would do things like, okay, well, I need to make some money while on the side, so I'm going to pick up coaching or whatever. And I remember, like, I'm not going to name names because that's just mean, but there was like some pros I would see and I would pay attention to what they're doing. And effectively they would go on a Discord call with whoever they're coaching and watch them do a draft or help them through a draft and say like, okay, well, I would pick this card for X, Y, Z reasons. And it felt to me less like coaching and more to me like I'm getting a personalized draft video from LSV, right? Like it just, I'm moving the mouse instead of him, but it's effectively like, because I was just like, that seems counterintuitive to like how you actually learn. Like, sure, if I open a pack of 15 cards and you say, pick that one, that's not going to tell me anything about like the methodology or what you're thinking or why. It just can say, okay, well, that's obviously the best 2/2 in the pack, so I better go with that, right? How do you, like, because one of my dear friends and frequent guest, Rebel, went to you for coaching, and she has been just like, just overwhelming with like praise for the fact that you've actually made her into a much better player of like 60 card formats and stuff. And I'm like, Rebel's hella good at Magic, so if somebody's actually making her better, I need to know. And so like, how do you break that idea of like, just because I know that one of the tendencies as a teacher is that you want to like, you watch your student doing something wrong and your instinct is like, okay, I got to grab your hand and fix what you're doing, because obviously you're doing it wrong. How do you look at that and like, how do you? I mean, I guess how do you teach someone?
Yeah, it is like a kind of a big thing, right? And it's really, I think, hard for some people to like understand that it is like a thing that is mostly, I think, teachable. Um, and so I would say kind of maybe backtracking a little bit about
Mm.
me and my approach to
Yeah,
magic.
actually,
But like,
I should find out
yeah,
who are you and why are you on
sure,
my show.
sure.
Because like I'm sorry, I was like doing research on you and I was reading a bunch of articles on Card Kingdom, and
Mhm.
you're very good at like explaining your ideas and methodology. And I saw that you've also played in like a million tournaments, including an
Mhm.
actual pro tour where uh, it may not have gone your way exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. So I've played two pro tours now, and the second one is the one that just happened, and it was really funny. I was a contractor on Modern Horizons 2, which maybe I'll come back in
Oh,
Casual Magic. I'll tell you how I killed your format or whatever. That's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. No, but jokes aside, so like I did that, and
three,
then
not no Modern Horizons 3, not 2, right?
three, yeah, the one that hasn't come out yet.
Oh,
Oh
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's coming soon. I can't wait to talk about it. I'm very excited.
Well,
Uh,
I will ask Blake, and he will say yes or no, but we'll see.
Nice. Nice. Well, so both that and though I like was working on the
Wait,
set up
wait, wait, wait,
until
wait.
yeah, yeah.
Wizards called you and said, "Hey, would you like to come help us out on a set?" And that's a
Correct.
Modern Horizon set, which
Correct.
means that you have chops, obviously, because they're not just going to ask me to come and help them design cards for Modern. So that
Mhm.
right there is already bona fide. So how do we get from here to there?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say that the my work ended and then the pro tour was a week later, and it
Mm.
never occurred to me to defer my pro tour invite. I was just like, it never crossed my mind until like I was like getting ready to leave for Philadelphia, and I was like, dang, I should have probably deferred. I did not get to practice at all for this pro tour, and I kind of like spewed it. That being said, I wouldn't change anything with how it all played out. So how did we get here is a good question. So I started playing competitive Well, I started playing Magic at the time because my girlfriend wanted to do the pre-release and she worked at an LGS, and it was Gatecrash. And so I did the Gatecrash
Nice.
pre-release. Yeah, and I picked up Magic pretty quickly. Like I was really good at attacking and blocking at the beginning.
I have talked to thousands of players. You
Mhm.
might be the first person I've met who's introduced by their girlfriend and
Yeah.
not vice versa.
So I didn't want to make it weird, but sometimes my go-to joke is, classic story: boy meets girl, girl teaches boy magic. And honestly, that's the future I'm trying to help manifest. But
I am here
uh,
for it.
yeah, so I'm a hero. Anyways, no, but so I did that, and I like forward my first one. I remember like I played a Blood Rush creature post combat, and I could have killed my opponent, and it was like 2 a.m. But I didn't know what Blood Rush was. I just played my creatures as creatures, and my opponent was like, "Why didn't you Blood Rush me?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is. Can you explain it to me?" And so I played, and then we broke up, and we went our kind of separate ways. But her dad and I had actually become good friends, and he opened up a store. Serious, true story. Me and her dad were good friends, and he opened up a store, and he's like, "Hey, I know it's awkward, blah blah blah, but like, I think you're really cool. If you ever want to play Magic, you're welcome at my new store." And so I started playing again. I played casually, and then I played another game competitively for a while, and then I came back to Magic full time, trying to like make it to the Pro Tour and succeed. At Hour of Devastation was the
Mm.
first season I grinded PPTQs, and I've been playing competitive Magic ever since. And my approach has always been, I want to be the best Mason that I can be. I don't care if that makes me like, just someone who never makes it to the Pro Tour or someone who is like a greatest of all time. All I care about is being better than the Mason who played the last tournament every time and always learning. And that
So
really put me in a position for teaching.
it's amazing you say that because like my guru, my religious teacher, basically is like when people come to him and they're like, "Oh, you know what? I want to convert to your religion, or I love your teaching and stuff." He's like, "No, no, no. I'm not here to convert you. I want you to be the best you, so that when you go back to your daily life, you are the best you that you can be. I don't need you to be
Mhm.
like me or in my crew. I just need you to manifest the best you." And so, like hearing that from someone else is like, "Oh, that's an idea that I fully can understand," which is like self improvement
Mhm.
for the sake of self improvement, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I connect with your guru. It sounds like because
yeah, I love it.
I really just believe in trying to like be the best you can to the people around you, do what you think is right, and then hopefully it all works out from there.
I'm
Yeah.
100% on board.
Mhm.
Now, it's funny though, because like I had a guest on Daniel a few months ago, and he was telling me like, yeah, he went to his LGS and the dude there who was teaching him how to play Magic or hanging out and playing with him, ended up coming back home and driving home with him and met his mom and fell in love, and now they're married. So his like his new stepdad is his old, F&M grinder. And I'm like, that's a story I've never dealt with before, but I'm here
Wow.
for it, man. God bless all y'all. Let's love it.
That's so sick.
It's so sick. It's like, and I mean, that's the kind of magic that I love. I love those weirdo stories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but so
Mm-hmm.
Hour of Devastation was awesome. First off,
Yes.
a lot of people didn't like it, but I just love turning things sideways. That was one of my favorite formats.
Great set.
So how did you, like, having played in tournaments, having played in like multiple big level tournaments, or really everything from, I guess, PTQ all the way up to the top, what is that experience like? Like, how do you go into that mindset of knowing that I have to play Magic for the next 9 hours or whatever, like 2 days worth of grinding?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you do to prepare yourself to, like, not just like bomb out 3/4 of the way through?
Yeah, it's funny. So one of the biggest things is like drinking a lot of water. I know that sounds silly. Everyone writes that article, and every 9 months, and the whole community goes, "What a great article!" No one's ever said it before. But jokes aside, it's like that is a big part of it. The other part is I kind of like mentally. I really enjoy competing. I really enjoy going out and interacting with people and playing the game and talking to people and stuff. So to me, it is very exciting, and it is a process I can stay a part of. But like drinking water, I would say, is the biggest thing. I also have just built up endurance over years of playing card games that has put me in a position to like really, I think, succeed in that position. And I really just take my time. I can play fast or whatever. And I think honestly, for a long time, it hindered me that like, I sometimes joke in coaching that LSV is one of the worst things to happen to competitive Magic players because he's so popular and he plays so quickly. And players are like, I want to be like LSV. I want to be like Shoto or whatever. And they play really quick.
Shoto's the worst. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I remember that game where he's like, him and his opponent are playing so fast that judges have to tell them to stop and slow down because he's just putting a thing on the table and already moving to the graveyard before the removal spell's even been played because you just know. It's like, okay, look, I understand you guys have telepathic connection. The rest of us need to pay attention to the rules. Slow down.
yeah. Just ease it up a little bit. No, but I joke that that's a big thing. And sometimes I'll make a joke in coaching that's like, do you believe in like a shared welfare or whatever? Because you're being a little bit of a Russian right now, and like just things like that. And so I try a lot. But I heard somewhere a long time ago, no, it was like maybe a year ago now, in a study that laughter creates memories and linking to it. So I try to work in laughter things and like bits whenever I can to coaching, because I find that people do remember it. And I've had people say things like, oh, I remembered like this joke or whatever when I was playing, and it helped me to like keep it in my mind's eye in a way that like some other things don't, even though other things I think might be easier to comprehend at just like a base level, but I don't have a good joke with it. So it didn't like stick for them as well,
Okay, so hang on a second. So
yeah. I know we're going all over the place.
But no, because you have a lot of ideas, but I want to make sure that we hit these in order to kind of gauge how to get here, because I've got questions. But so if you're starting to grind and you've been really going at the grind, how did you get Wizard's attention?
So it's kind of a long story, but I'll give you the 35-second version of it. The 35-second version is I bumped into a Wizards of the Coast employee before War of the Spark was an officially announced set, to be a Planeswalker set. And I was talking to some pro friends who will rename nameless Matt Nass, and they were joking about I'm just joking. It wasn't actually Matt. I just thought it'd be funny if I said that. No, but so we were joking about it, and they were telling Dan, and I was saying how I thought it was possible to have a Planeswalker centric set because they'd never done one before, and that'd be a good way to do it, and all the characters seem to be converging. Right. And they were like, well, you can't do that. Like, they're all at Mythic. And I was saying you can do them at uncommon and rare. And like, it'd be really easy to do that. And I talked to Dan a little bit. And he's like, oh, we should like talk later. And so I talked to him later, had some conversations, and it led to me taking the design test. And I sort of took the design test, and basically I got told like, hey, your answers are like pretty good, but like you don't have any results yet in Magic. So like, it's kind of hard to trust you on rate or whatever. So like, go out to the wild and do your thing. And that was when Autumn Burchett won the first MC1. That MC is where I met Dan. In fact, when Carmen and I rushed the stage a couple minutes later, it's like literally like I got done talking to Dan. Like,
you were the other guy.
Yes, I am the guy who rushed the stage.
Like, that's one of the most famous moments in PT history.
Yeah, I see myself in a lot of videos.
Yeah, and I'm like, because like obviously Carmen's one of my friends. Autumn is a person I know well, and so it's just like,
Mhm.
Well, you're the other person.
That's me. So it's funny that weekend's also where I met Carmen, who is now my girlfriend, and so it's like this whole like wild thing where it's like kind of a really serendipitous weekend with how everything sort of worked out. But that's how I met him, and then I would talk to Dan occasionally.
Dan.
Dan Musser of Wizards of the Coast. Sorry, my bad. He is the manager of play design, and then I got reached out to, and my understanding in part because of Dan's remembering. When I talked to Dan, I had some ideas for like some straight to modern cards that were basically cards from like MH1 that weren't announced yet. And so Dan, it's funny. I actually think my cards were much weaker than his cards. So I think it's not normally the case when like
So
people
what if you
pitch
had this
cards to Wizards.
2/1 monkey that could rush in and make a treasure?
I had Force of Negation, which I called Force of Negate for 4 mana and didn't exile. And then I saw theirs and I was like, dang, they think you can really make this card strong. And so, but it was exactly the same outside the exile and the mana value. So it was a really interesting. I like talking about my stuff. And so that's how I kind of got on their eyes. And then during the summer of last year, I won DreamHack Dallas playing 4-color, and I got ninth in that the GP Vegas right after lockdown ended. I got ninth on breakers by like I think 0.03%, which I've been told is a tie for the closest miss of all time. I refuse to look it up because it's a great bad beat story, and I can say it with 100% honesty because I've never looked it up. But I'm told I'm tied for the closest miss of all time. So don't reach out to me. I do not want to know. It's much better to live my life in pain like this. But so that's how I did that with 4-color, and then I won DreamHack Dallas with 4-color when I played Sol Mako. So if you've been to the RC, I'm the guy next to Sol in the big banner, and I did that and sort of dominated Modern for all the summer. Like it's funny, 4-color kind of dominated all over, but in the States, my deck lists are the only ones that ever won big tournaments. Like NRGs were won, but players just copied my deck list or got it from my Patreon and then played it like card for card. So it's this cool thing where I feel like I don't like to have a big ego, but it's the one thing I think I was maybe one of the best of in the world was the 4-color deck. And I generally think of myself as a Modern expert. And when I was practicing 4-color, I never played 4-color. I only played other decks so I could understand them when I was playing against 4-color. So I think that really helped prepare me for Modern Horizons, where it's like, like the whole format. You have this good understanding of game design, etc. And sort of got the call. Actually got the call before I knew I was qualified for the Pro Tour, went and played the RC and qualified, and now we're here. And then that's how it all started. I went to go work at Wizards. I was working at a private practice of psychiatry beforehand, and then
so you actually have the ability to talk to humans.
Yes, I interact with humans. It's sort of my job. And then I was like, okay, I was doing coaching at night, and I was doing coaching, and I was having 2 to 3 people every day.
Okay,
so I was working a full-time job.
Slow down.
Well, I'm just saying now I'm full-time coach. That's how we got
there.
I'm
like, all right, communists, let's hang on a second.
Sure, yeah.
Because you're Russian.
Yeah, no, I was trying to give this. I feel bad, but I guess I'm sort of the guest, so I shouldn't feel bad. But
yeah, no, it's just everybody knows about me. No, they're like,
That's
look,
true.
there's a jerk who just keeps talking crap about CDH all the time. I like CDH.
Card of the day.
Yeah, no, exactly. Look, you know what? Posting that stupid card of the day every morning is like my favorite part of every day because it's just
it's great.
What random thought do I have at 6:45 a.m. about some garbage card from like Nemesis or something?
I think Magic's really cool. So getting to see random cards is cool.
It's my favorite thing in the world because just like, look, it's a card. This is fun. We love this. Why aren't we all just enjoying the fact that there's just weird crap that nobody thought about for 30 years? And then someone's like, oh, that's the centerpiece of my Frangleham deck. And I'm like, I've never heard of Frangleham. And they're like, aren't you on the CAG? How do you not know Frangleham? And I'm like, bro, there are 12,000 legends that come out every day. Relax.
Is that a real card? Were you making it up for the? Okay,
it's entirely made up.
Okay, I was trying to think of what Frankelheimen is because I have a
But
pretty good memory.
It could be. It could be a Jumpstart legal legend that you've never seen before.
It sounds like a straight to Commander Eldraine card.
Right?
It sounds like it's like, all right, what fable is that one
from?
Like
if I told you that this was an Eldraine Jumpstart card that was only in set boosters, you would be like, of course it was. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, obviously. Duh.
but what I'm trying to say though is like, what made you think? Or what gave you the impetus to want to coach? How do you get from like I understand, okay, you work at WotC or you're doing Pro Tour stuff. That's cool. That's a grind. That's a pathway. But coaching is not on that track, right? Like, because like I remember like Reed Duke was doing coaching and stuff, and that was just because he's like, I'm Reed Duke. I can share my insights and stuff. It'll
Hmm.
be cool. But like when Paulo did his class, that was
Hmm.
cool. And I was like, okay, neat. But how did you decide, or did people come up to you and say, how did you do this? Can you teach me? Or how does this work?
Yeah, so I got started with when I was young. And just in general, my whole life, I felt this need that my job needs to give back to people and help them. And I'm a pretty big believer that helping people enjoy their hobby or improve at something that they like doing counts towards that. If that makes
How have
sense.
we
So
not been friends like this whole time?
I don't know, man. Just different
Like,
circles.
yeah, I feel like our philosophies match really, really well.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, the start of a beautiful friendship.
Let's
And
go.
so, yeah. So that was a big thing to me as a kid. Was I really wanted to be a teacher, and then I learned how much teachers got paid, and I was like, well, there's probably some other way I can help people. And so, it's unfortunate, but so that was a big part of it for me. And then with coaching, it became a thing where it's like I can't remember exactly how I started, but I just remember thinking like I've always liked helping people. I think I can be good at this. I want to do it. And I did it for a couple people. And I had like, probably 3 to 6 people I was seeing a month before DreamHack Dallas win. And then I won as Dallas and really sort of like four color exploded in popularity. And I had a bunch of people who just wanted four color coaching. They didn't really want magic coaching, if that makes sense.
So
And
they were like, you are the best with this deck. Teach me how to win with this deck.
But yeah, a lot of people did sessions that were like mulligan sideboarding, like basic like matchup, like a macro breakdown of what matters in the matchups. And I would do that or whatever, but I don't really like doing that as much because that's just like me info
Just to
dumping and
clarify,
not really
was this
looking to
four
teach.
color Omnath or was this four color
Mhm.
Yorion?
It was
Or
Yorion, like Yorion Omnath, like
that
the
big
deck you
pile of
hated,
blink.
I probably helped make better. You know what I mean?
Dude,
Like,
you say that, but like I remember during that era, um, Channel Fireball was doing those online streaming
Mhm,
events, like the online streaming, I guess I
mhm,
don't know, GP pseudo pro tour tournaments, whatever.
mhm,
And they had me because they were desperate for anybody to talk to, and they had me come
mhm,
on to do commentary
mhm.
and with Seth Manfield of all people. And and I'm like, okay, well, I'm good at talking, but like I don't know much about standard. Every deck was a four color Yorion mirror. And it was just like
Yeah,
mono Yorion mirrors for like 4 hours. And I'm like, okay, I think I
yeah.
understand this deck now.
Yeah, and this was like the modern version, right? So Solitude and Fury and
Oh God.
Counterspell, like everything that people don't really like, I think objectively not a super engaging game if it's the best deck. So with that all going on, that was kind of what I was doing. And people wanted to do that, but I really preferred to like help people learn and improve at Magic the game. And a big thing was definitely I became friends with Jesse Robkin.
Mm,
And so like when we became friends, I definitely like early on I helped her out a little bit and helped her kind of like improve at Magic. And in a lot of ways, Jesse like working with her and
Jesse's hella good.
she's very good. Yeah. And it gave me the confidence to like do coaching full time because she was smart and had a lot of talent and had done things like she had top aided Ann NRG before we like met and I like started not officially coaching her, but I was like helping her in a way that like is very similar to a coach.
Mm,
And so it was like, oh, I think I could help other people do this. And like, obviously, I don't think it's reasonable to expect to get everyone to Jesse's level, but like there is something to what's going on here. And so I was doing that, and then I helped a couple other people out, and that was like a pretty big thing. So like Samantha Murphy is someone who I've done a lot of coaching with who she top aided the Legacy Pit into Eternal Weekend back to back in Legacy. And she's great. Whatever, just like someone who just
oh,
needed a little bit of help, like to understand. And for a lot of people, that is the barrier. And I know we're going to get into that later. So, I'll leave a pin in it for now, but sometimes it's just a little push is what someone needs. And I think that was what the case was with Jesse and Samantha was just like, oh, getting taught this way really helps. And so that was the big thing. And then when I got the play design, the FFL job at Wizards of the Coast, and worked at Modern Horizons 3 for a little bit and came back, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do this full time. I've been saving up money. I can live like my life pretty good if I just get a couple more people a day than what I already have. And I'm opening up all this time and I'll do content creation. And, I do commentary for the NRG series. So that's like another thing. So I had a lot of various income sources. And then I like made the post and it popped off. And I'm incredibly blessed, and I work like 6 8 hours every day, and
Damn,
so
dude.
yeah, it's
That's
unreal.
I mean, if you can make a living at it and you can pay your bills, God bless. That's a real hard that's hard to do in this in Magic these days. It is
Yes,
very hard. But
I am
you're
incredibly blessed.
yeah,
Yes.
and you're also lucky to live in a place that's significantly cheaper than where I live. I could not
Yeah.
I would have to be coaching people like 25 hours a day to get away with.
Yeah,
Uh,
I could have lived in downtown Nashville, and I recently moved to a place that's a little cheaper, and I'm really appreciating the small town living.
I
So,
mean, yeah. So let's dive into that though. It's like if a player comes to you and they're like, "Hey, I want to become a better I want to become better at like doing
mhm,
pioneer tournaments or something or like explorer, historic or any whatever
mhm.
format, right?" How do you start? Like what do you do with your clients initially? How do you set this up?
Yeah, so the first thing I do is I typically ask them to give me sort of a little breakdown of what like their hopes are from coaching. Because there are some things I just don't think I am the best person to go to, and I'll send people other places. A good
Mm,
example is limited. Like I am probably better than 95% of people who play limited. I do not think I am at the level that is reasonable for me to charge for coaching of it. You know what I mean? And I nor do I want to charge someone who's brand new to Magic who's just learning. And
yes.
so I would send them to like Sam Black or resources if they're like brand new. You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, like now that let's assume we match up on our goals or whatever, and I think I can help you. Typically that's for most constructed things for general improvement at Magic. It's really just limited and theoretically vintage, but no one's ever asked about vintage, where I would send them elsewhere. And so I assume one day I'll have to say no
I
because of
figure,
vintage.
if you're already playing vintage, chances are you are not the person who needs coaching.
You'd be surprised.
I mean, maybe. I
Yeah.
guess someone's got to start a vintage somewhere. Like,
Yeah, exactly. There's got to be new heads of vintage, right? But I unfortunately can't help you. Sorry, vintage new head. But
I,
Dom Harvey, go to him. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, let's talk about it. And then I sort of do a little interview and get to know them. And I ask them things, and I have a little scale to get some context. And it's much more the conversation than the actual numbers. But I ask them like, how are you at like attacking and blocking? How are you at macro and micro game planning? How are you at sideboarding? How are you at mulliganing? And
what does
sort
that
of
mean, macro and micro?
yeah, so some players mean it in different ways. The way I'm using it in coaching is macro is sort of big picture, what matters in the matchup. So to give like a quick little example here, right? Let's say you were playing 4 color control and I was playing Murktide in Modern. The Murktide player really wants to stick an early threat, hope that the 4 color player uses something like Leyline Binding or Solitude on it instead of Murktide, and then I want to slam Murktide plus Counterspell, and that as the Murktide player is my macro game plan. It sort of highlights the key cards, what matters in the matchup, and sort of what's going on. It's a little more nuanced than that, but that's a good 10-second version of it.
Hmm.
Micro is the actual game plan in the game itself. So like we're in the game and we're playing. Sometimes I compare it to like a
Like turn to
general.
turn.
Yeah, turn to turn. So it's like a general versus a soldier on the field, right? The general might say, go straight. And then the soldier's like, there's a truck in the way. We can't do that. We got to go around. And so,
Mm,
understanding those two is really important because understanding the macro informs what your micro should be.
yeah.
Because if you need to understand what the objective is to win and how the key cards that matter, and it's something Jerry Thompson sort of alluded to, and I had to kind of figure out. And then one day I finally got to talk to him about it. But like he calls it the truth of the matchup, which is sort of the key cards that interact, the inflection points, and sort of what actually matters. And so understanding sort of the truth of the matchup is the macro, and being able to play your turns is the micro.
That's so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
like, it makes sense when you talk like that because,
Mhm.
like, I mean, obviously, that's not the sort of thing that I run into because as a
Mhm.
primary commander or limited player, like, our piles are not focused
Mhm.
enough to be able to develop an idea of a macro or micro. I
Mhm.
mean, unless you're a CDH player, but that's a different bag of fish because that's more
Yeah.
focused ideas. But, like, for me, the table I sit at is never going to be the same for people that are going to be ever again. So that
Mhm.
mix may not come up and so you have to kind of use more broad generalization strategies and know your own deck. But when
Mhm.
you're playing like if I like for instance, I play elves in modern. I'm a very
Mhm.
good elves player. I've been playing it
Mhm.
for many years.
My
And
first modern deck.
yeah, like
Yeah.
the other deck that I saw that you played a ton of was Amulet Titan, which is like one of my
Yes.
other favorite decks of all time. Uh, but like as an elves player, like I know, okay, I need to dodge these threats. I need to be able to build my board in this way in order to be able to make my moves. But because elves is such a like you know glory or feast or famine deck, right? Like it either
Mhm.
works or you're just dead. There's not a lot of having to worry about matchups because I'm like, I'm either going to win or I'm just going to get blown out of the water. Um, but that's also just because that's all probably why I'm only an okay modern player and not a
Mhm.
really good one. Because it's only like a tier 3 deck anyways these days.
Mhm.
So rip my poor elves. You know
Rip
what
elves.
sucks? Fury. Fury
Oh my
sucks.
gosh.
God, I
Don't get
hate
me started
Fury.
on Fury. If they gave me the keys to the castle, I don't think we'd have a conversation about this card, but that's fine.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
Fury was bad, and then they put out friggin' Bowmaster, and I'm like, you just don't want me to play elves ever again.
Yeah, I am just about finished with Legacy Elves when Bowmaster came out. And so my Legacy Elves is finished because it is dead. So
I
I got
sold
those
out of my
Cradles.
deck at Vegas. I just finally sold out my Legacy Elves deck that I just had for years because I'm like, there's no way I could beat a Bowmaster, and they're not banning it from Legacy. So
Yeah.
rip me. Uh, God, that makes me sad.
Yeah.
But like the idea of like, especially in modern these days or in Pioneer or whatever, you've got like these fixed decks that are definitely closer to the top. You've got like Rakdos Scam, you've got Murktide, you've got I just hate Murktide. That's just such a
Sure.
it's like somebody took Delver decks and then just made them 20 times more miserable.
Well, they made them able to be Jund decks, so you can't overpower them, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the secret.
because that's what Delver needed. It needed to be the Jund deck.
Yeah, need to be more resilient. That's what we thought the Delver decks were lacking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God, I
Yeah.
hate Delver. But
Mhm.
like, so in general, but that means that you need to know obviously all of the meta game and the idea of
Mhm.
how these decks work back and forth.
Mhm.
How do you do that? Do you just play a lot?
So historically in Magic, I play way less than my contemporaries ever do. And in part,
Mm,
if you think about my life up till this point, right? I'm working a full-time job, I'm doing content, I'm streaming, I'm writing, and like it just I had to learn other ways. And so
I
a
know
lot
that
of it,
feeling.
yeah, right. And a big thing I tell Magic players is that Magic players love to test Magic, which is just they play games and don't actually learn anything.
Hmm.
And that is not actually testing, and there's a lot of ways to learn and to get things. So, for example, listening to podcasts or streams or reading over deck lists, these are all good ways to learn. A thing I'll often do is I'll like look at decks and think about how they will sideboard versus a deck. This is a thing that I would go over in coaching a lot is kind of how to identify how to sideboard in a matchup, because as you might expect, the number one thing I get from players when I run down that list is, man, I do not know how to sideboard. I use a sideboard guide, and I am pro sideboard guide, not just because they help pay the rent, but because I do think it is a helpful thing. But it is the thing that I think players should get better at on their own. Because I think if you
Yeah.
could write your own guide and then you go and let's say buy Jesse's guide, then you can challenge your beliefs with Jesse, and it's not just blindly absorbing it, and you might
Yeah, so
understand.
I want to get into
Mhm.
that specifically because
Yeah.
sideboarding is one of my biggest weaknesses.
Mhm.
Because like I understand, like okay, I've got my 15 cards. These 3 cards are like obviously bringing in like Dismember is going to be fantastic in this specific matchup. Okay,
Mhm.
but what cards do I take out? That's where I
Mhm.
always get lost because I'm like, all the cards in my main deck are part of my plan and the
Mhm.
thing that helps my deck win. How do I cut anything from this to even like when I watch people play like 8 post or whatever on Legacy and stuff like that, and I'm like, you need all these ramp cards to get to your post. You need all these like your prime times and stuff. How are you cutting anything? And I think that's like the one learning. Like it's one thing I can just grab Paulo's sideboard guide or whatever and just copy and paste. Like, oh, I'm playing against these. I'm going to take out these
Mhm.
6 and that put in those 6. But I think you're exactly right. The real trick is not giving a mana fish, but teaching them this
Mhm.
is the stuff you need to look for in your pile. That's not going to do you any favors. That you can
Mhm.
look judiciously at. Like
It goes
if I
back to the
can,
macro, right? We talked about
yeah,
it before. If you understand the big cards, understand importantly the cards that don't matter, you start to figure it out a little bit.
yeah, because like I'm going to let you in on a secret, which is one of my biggest weaknesses in the history of Magic, which is, so I've been playing for a million years, and one of the things that I took me until like just now to learn was
Mhm.
how to discard cards to things like Faithless Looting, because every card in my hand is a card that I put in my deck, and I don't want to throw it away for nothing. And learning how to sit there and give up those cards or exile stuff from my yard for Murktide or whatever it is like the hardest thing in the world. That's one of the biggest skills. So you have to kill your children, right? Like
Mhm.
you have to like, these are my babies, all 60 of them.
Mhm.
I can't possibly throw one away. What?
Solitude and Fury do the same thing,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
that's a big weak. Sometimes players aren't willing to give up like another Solitude, but it's like Listen, that creature's going to deal you 10 damage. I don't
Right.
care that Solitude's going to kill it in 2 turns in the hard cast. You're
Exactly.
going to
Like
die.
pitching force to force something
Mhm.
is like a real tough. Like you're like, but that's
Mhm.
another force. Okay, yeah, but if that spell resolves, you die.
You ever pitch a recall to a force? I mean, that takes conviction. You've got to mean it.
Like, dude, that card better be worth it, man. That card better be friggin' worth it.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
Time
So
Vault, whatever in Vintage. It's like the
yeah,
other
I
one.
guess. All right. So if you had a player like me who just
Mhm.
in there terrified of like throwing things away or cutting from their deck, where do you even start?
I mean, context is key, but let's just use like the faithless looting type scenario, right?
Sure.
So you mentioned you put all these cards into your deck, right? Which means you probably also put looting in your deck because you know it needs to function. I would say that one of the things that we probably worked on in theory earlier is we talked about sort of the idea of telling a story when we're playing and the kind of what is our opponent doing that's informing our decisions, right? Because every action they take or notably don't take gives us a lot of information, right? So to give a quick example, if I go Blackleaf Cliffs and no Thoughtseize on turn 1 in Pioneer, I don't have Hive of the Eye Tyrant. You probably know I don't have Thoughtseize, right? That's a pretty safe bet. But then let's say I turn 2, I play Hive of the Eye Tyrant, right? That land comes into play tap starting on turn 3. If I had it on turn 1, I probably would have played it, which means if I'm worried about a card, that won't be there, right? So like that's an example of story and thinking about. So we're thinking about those things. And your Faithless Looting deck probably has something that's like a bingo square, right? Like Arclight Phoenix, Grizzlebrand, whatever, your format is of choice there. So
Yeah.
with that going on and you don't have those moments, it's good to think what is going to help my main game plan and sort of what's going to make the symphony sing, right? And so it's like, yes, all these cards are nice, but maybe it's an example of like, well, Thought Scour helps me find my Arclight Phoenixes while Sleight of Hand sees 2 cards. But if I think about it, Thought Scour sees 3 cards, right? Because Graveyard is my friend in my deck. And just things like that, right? So that's like kind of a vague thing, but sort of understanding like this is what our deck's trying to do. And we don't have that card for some silly reason. We have it to enable our strategy. And one thing I would probably tell you is you're probably casting Faithless Looting at the wrong time, right? Generally, you want to use cards like Faithless Looting to enable synergies or to kind of move through a land pocket, right? So one thing that I typically tell players is like, look at Fable the Mirror Breaker, right? Its chapter 2 is similar to Faithless Looting. Playing it on curve is really strong because it's a high impact card. But as the game goes on, the mid game, if you're playing a Fable deck, you start to want to hold your lands because you want to discard your lands to turn them into redraws. Same with something like Faithless Looting, right? If you have some way to change material into other material, lands is a good way to do it, or just sort of waiting to cast your spells. Sounds like you play some Legacy, so you probably understand the adage of wait on your brainstorms, right?
Yes.
Because the longer you wait on brainstorm, the more information your brainstorm has because there's less information going on in the game. Expressive Iteration is the same in Modern. If you're a Murktide player, I bet you're casting your Expressive Iterations too early. Is my advice I always tell people who play Murktide. But if you wait, you'll be able to know exactly what the problem is. Because if you cast your Looting, you have to choose between, Unholy Heat and Lightning Bolt. It's really hard to know. But, if you waited later in the game, they might be at 3 because your Delver connected. You didn't know it was going to, right? So that sort of thing matters.
Yeah, and obviously, like, that's one of the things is sometimes you look at, like, I just say looting because that's just my token, card. But there's other cards that are like, play this and pitch another card to draw 2 cards type of thing, right? And I just sit there and I'm like, you shouldn't be discarding your bolt because that's the point of your deck. That's what you're looking for. And if you're in a situation where you've got this draw and this bolt, maybe you need to wait a turn or two till you get some other stuff and just sit on this card, no matter how much it's burning burning a hole in your pocket, right? Like
patience is a virtue.
Yeah, and it's one of the hardest lessons to learn. But in Magic, you don't win if you're not like the rest of us are not programming machines the way that LSV is. We can't just telegraph 12 turns deep. It's like I keep coming back to Reed Duke because he's like my favorite player and I love to watch him. But Reed always he's the most thoughtful and considered player I've ever seen, next to I don't know, the French guys, right? Like because Duke will just sit there and go into the tank for minutes, and you're like, did you fall asleep? And it's like, no, he's actually mapping out how to actually win the game. And I just don't have the patience because I have ADHD and play Commander.
I feel that on the ADHD. Starting in 2 days, I'll have a Commander deck, so we'll be ready to
go. We'll have to talk about that, man. I'm very curious where a pro who's a coach goes for a Commander. Like, what do you... We'll get to that. But okay, so do you mainly focus on 60 card sort of kind of competitive?
Yeah, I for the most part engage with that when it comes to Magic. I mean, my relationship with Magic has also gotten a little weirder when it comes to playing in my free time because like I do it for, like I mentioned, let's say 8 hours a day on average. So that makes it kind of hard to like want to go and jam for fun in the same way. I
Hmm.
still like will go and play like my weekly modern tournament.
Yeah, but that's
For
why we
example,
play things like Dan Dan, right?
yeah, exactly. And so I find things like Dan Dan fun. I really like Cube in person. I don't really like it
Same.
online. And so like I'll do that. Two Birds are a great way, if you've ever encountered one of those. And I do have EDH decks. I have like Fibble Thip or the coin flippy guys. I forget their
Um,
names.
it's a Zinder Split and Okun.
Zinder Split. Yes,
Okun and
yeah.
Zinder Split. Yeah.
Yeah, so the story is I was like, okay, I'm going to try and play Commander. And I built a Commander deck that I purposely made weak, like no Soul Ring level of weak. I was like, this is like, but I picked Lear because I also do not want to play 2 hour Commander games. Like I am somewhat sympathetic to your Frail Whale stance. I've been following it on Twitter, right?
God,
Like
I hate
games lasting another hour is not conducive to my experience. So
it's.
yeah, I wanted to have a way to win. And so I went and I actually at GP Vegas after I missed and got ninth or whatever. I'm friends with Kes Wiley of the Monsters of Modern, and they had two
Alex
fans.
and Kessler is one of my best friends, man. I'm a big
Yeah,
fan.
he's super nice. Yeah, and so he was like, "We're about to play EDH. You want to be our fourth?" And I was like, "Sure." And like everyone's decks were kind of medium power, and I was like, "Yeah, I made my deck super weak, like not Soul Ring in my deck level of weak." And they were like, "Cool." And then I very easily won. And I was like, okay. And then as I was getting up, I heard that we need one for a CDH pod, and I was like, all right, I'm going to play the CDH. So I set down the CDH pod with my purposefully bad built deck, and I very easily won. And I was like, one, I have misunderstood exactly how bad built is. And two, I got a little lucky. They all had mana rocks, and then someone played Stony Silence,
Oh,
and
GG's.
and my deck was like 41 islands. I didn't have Soul Ring, and I was using High Tide to win eventually with Lear. So everyone else just sat there with no mana, and I eventually won. But it was also very easy. And no one attacked or did anything to me because I just sat there and played a land every turn.
A very well-known pro came up to me and Gavin Verhey at that first Vegas after lockdown, and was like, "Yeah, I learned to play EDH over the forced holiday that we had, and I brought this deck. I want you guys to check it out." And he shows me this deck, which is like black and blue turbo control, hand destruction, creature destruction, win with like a 2/2, and I'm like, "You're gonna get to play this deck once." No one will ever play with you again. And also, this is going to be the most miserable 3.5 hours of your life because you're winning with a 1/1 against 120 life points, and nobody's got any hand and nobody's got any cards. And you're just like, this is what the heck, bro. Let's reframe our mind thought to be like, there's four of us.
Yeah, no, I for sure. It is definitely a unique experience. So when that happened, I always liked the idea of coin flip cards, and so I wanted to have those cards, but they were pretty expensive. Then they did the Secret Lair, heads I
Yes.
win, tails you lose. So I bought that. Then a year later, I got that, and so now I have my Commander deck. And so that way, no matter what happens, I can always lose because my deck might just fail, which I really appreciate. And then it's really fun when I overcome the failing.
Yeah,
So
and
I
also
have
it's
that
fun
deck,
when you
yeah.
win 128 flips in a row.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I didn't understand how the thumb thing worked with the one card. I got to keep flipping. And I was like,
gross.
really?
It's
Yeah.
gross. It's
Yeah.
Gavin really just nailed it with that deck, but it's
Mhm.
also really stupid. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, like there's because I think that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of, like, especially with Rebel, for instance, and
Mhm.
other 60 card, other like CDH players or 100 card players who are like, what is that other side of Magic like? And trying to shift from there to there versus seeing a lot of these pros be like, if everybody's playing Commander, I guess I should figure that out. And
Mhm.
seeing how different the mindset is and how
Mhm.
your deck building like strategies and stuff don't translate. Like,
Mhm.
and you try to bring, because like a 60 card, a person who is a tournament grinder who's mainly been playing standard, modern, pioneer, and just efficiency, high efficiency decks, and they come in and they build a deck with like 2 win conditions and 38 ways to tutor for it, and
Mhm.
just like the most turbo s decks you can imagine, and you're like, I think you missed the mission briefing here. Like,
Mhm.
we're here to hang out for a couple hours and chill and like just
Mhm.
shoot the BS and talk about games, and you won on turn 3. So we're
Mhm.
just gonna keep playing. And
Yeah.
it's like there's a weird bad feeling. So I guess I'm going to ask you this question that's not
Yeah.
necessarily related to your coaching, but how would you help somebody transition from one of these formats to the other?
So, do you mean specifically from Commander to
Yeah,
60?
let's say from Commander to like
Yeah.
Modern.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is one that it is going to be like you just mentioned a different experience, right? So the ideal thing of Commander typically is to have fun. I would say on average, and like you said, socialize, and it's sort of like a board game, but with
Mm,
the Magic cards you own. Right, it's
right.
like the best board game ever, and so that's sort of what's going on. Whereas in 60 cards, typically it is still sort of a board game, just with different rules, right? But the intention is more coming from winning because it is a 1v1 environment. And just because you won doesn't mean it's over, right? Like I think that's funny when sometimes people who only play Commander talk to me. It's like, yeah, we lose on turn 3 to shuffle up and play again. And it's like, yeah, if I'm not at a tournament, I do too. You know what I mean? It's not like I 2-0 someone at the LGS and then I walk away forever. You know what I mean? Like if I'm there to have fun, I'm there to have fun. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
so like the experience is different, and there's a lot more things on like sequencing and like making sure that you're like being precise with your stuff and thinking ahead, because you cannot get bailed out in the same way that you do normally, right? So like I watched today Shuffle Up and Play with the prof and the Doctor Who stuff, and Gavin got very far ahead and became like the arch enemy, and everyone teamed up on Gavin, right? And obviously in a 1v1 situation it's going to be different. Like you're going to always be there from the beginning, but if you make a mistake or slip up, you might not have the capability of 2 other players in their decks to help you out, and that goes along with deck building, right? And so understanding the matchups and the fighting over these sort of things and sort of the nuance of the game is probably going to be the biggest thing. And one thing I typically tell people is, especially for Modern is a huge format with lots of cards that interact in weird ways. Even post MH2, if you hate the Modern Horizon sets, it's still a big format. There's still a lot of nuance going on, and you're
Mm.
going to just walk your head into the wall, very similar to Commander. And
Mhm.
so you should just focus on optimizing your turns and understand that your opponents, just because they want to win, doesn't mean they don't like you, right? Like a lot of people just get serious or whatever because there's like money on the line or whatever, but they're down to have fun and hang out. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason, a lot of these people are cool, and like you see so many funny stories and stuff or whatever. So, um, I guess my long-winded way of saying is the first thing is the vibe's going to be a little different when you're playing, but post it's going to be very similar to what you're doing with EDH, and there's going to be a lot more focus on sequencing and understanding sort of nuance and knowledge. And I think that's very much there in CEDH, where the decks are optimized to kind of win. But like you mentioned, EDH, there's probably some amount of macro knowledge you have. Like if there's a Kalia deck, I bet you know the best dragon and the best
Sure.
angel, right? And so you're like, oh, okay, I know that is something that can happen, and that's good to know. And maybe, for example, Tori's your opponent, and she goes, oh, that's not in my deck, and everyone's like, okay, she's playing like weak Kalia, she just likes the card. But like that sort of thing's happening in Modern, understanding those sort of things of like, okay, Rhinos is going to try and put a bunch of 4/4s in play really quickly, and then they're going to 2/4 themselves to get free spells to pull ahead in a very tempo-esque deck. Have you ever heard of Delver before? This is Modern Delver, right? Like that is like the way I would start to go
I
about it.
love rhinos, by the way. I love
Yeah,
rhinos.
Rhinos is a cool deck.
Yeah.
It is all Modern Horizon cards, but it is a cool deck.
Yeah, I know, but it's still though. It's like something about cascading into rhino just makes me smile. It's like I love
Yeah.
that feel. I mean,
Yeah.
Cascade's also just one of my favorite mechanics, but like
Mhm.
it just because that's one of the things I think people have noticed about me is like, and I hate to keep bringing this back to myself, but
No,
obviously that's the story I
yeah.
know. And when I go and play against people at one-on-one, like it, so I play a lot of side events and drafts and stuff because I love playing limited, and
Mhm.
like limited is maybe my favorite format, even possibly over Commander sometimes. But like I play a lot of limited at like these GPs and other events, and people will sit down and they know me from like this or from just being like the goofball who plays bad cards on Prof's channel or
Mhm.
Commander stuff. And they're like, all right, we're gonna sit down and it's gonna be a silly fun time. And then I just go and like, murderate them and like just
Yeah.
aerate their body, and they're just like, what the hell just happened? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, we're playing one-on-one.
Mhm.
This is different. It's like the goal that we sat down to do is one of us is going to wake up winning.
Mhm.
And like if we're playing at EDH table, my goal is to make sure the rest of the table is having a good time. So we leave
Mhm.
feeling like we spent our time well, that
Mhm.
we enjoyed it and that we want to do it again. When we're playing one-on-one, you and I have an agreement that one of us is going to win and one of us is going to lose, and I'm going to be the one who wins. That might be not part of your agreement, but that's the implicit one here.
Mhm.
And like there's no hard feelings. I mean, you get salty, but you get salty at your deck, not necessarily at those
Yeah.
guys totally unless you're like real just Mitgo
Yeah,
chat room grinder. Don't be that person.
yeah,
Um,
don't be that person. More be that person when you're playing me, because I love when people salt me in Moto chat. It's very fun. It's very
it's like,
fun.
look at you, Mr. Net Decky Luxac. Yeah, I still
Yeah,
won, buddy.
yeah, no, for sure. No, you got so unlucky. Yeah, you fury down my 1/1 on turn one, but yeah, very unlucky. I agree. You're lucky to be in the game with the way you were playing. You know, it's like
It's
relax.
like, look, bro, you won despite your hand, not because of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh
Yeah,
God.
yeah. Hmm.
I don't know. It just sometimes I see people grab decks off the internet, or
Hmm.
like LSV is such a perfect example. You see LSV go to Cube, and you're like, "Oh, I can do that," and then you draft Storm, and you're like, "I've got a pile of unplayable garbage I don't know how to
Yeah.
sequence at all."
Mhm.
But you'll like after any pro tour or something, someone will win with like the hot deck. Everybody will come and try to get that deck and play with it next week, and they'll have no idea how, like, because like you saw the winning match, but you didn't see what the average match looks like, or what it looks like
Mhm.
when you're like getting a garbage hand, right? Like,
Well, also, I think this is where I really step in. Is like you don't have a good core understanding of Magic the game, right?
mm,
Like, and this is the thing that I try to get across to people is like I tell them these like 5 questions at first, which we quickly went over, and it's like that is the foundation which will build your house. That is your
yes,
skill, and if you have a bad foundation, your house will crumble. And you could succeed, and you could make it to the pro tour with a bad foundation, a little shaky one, but you're not going to be able to consistently do these things, and you're like, wow, this deck, like this is so common. Someone wins the Pro Tour with a deck that is probably a good deck, but not the best deck, right? And let's say it's like Reed Duke, for example. They have amazing technical play. They don't miss small edges, and they have good attacks and blocks. And if you don't have those things, and you're not playing the actual best deck, it's going to cascade on itself, right? And so it's like, oh, this deck sucks. Like Reed's such a master. And it's like, well, yes, Reed's a master, but
but he's also
also
got
like
fundamentals.
exactly. Yeah, like he understood to attack and block, and you didn't realize that you had to attack your 3/3 into their 3/3 because they were never going to block and you needed to push the damage. Right. And
Right.
like understanding that is the difference maker so often.
Yes. I
Yep.
think I think actually, like, over the course of the chat, I think what I've really appreciated is this notion of, you're right, you do need to know just how are your attacks and blocks. Do you know when it's right to attack your 2/2 into their 4/4, or like, do you know that, like, are they protecting that card? Are they going to block with it? Are they going to like one thing I've learned from just playing a lot of limited, especially, is like, you learn like, oh, there's some cards that these players don't want to sacrifice, they don't want to trade, or they're definitely holding out because they think they can alpha you next turn. So you can just start inching in and just getting these onesie twosies and just getting these points across, because they think you're trying to bait them into something, or they think you got a trick or whatever. But you need to start doing that so you can actually win the game. Like,
Hmm.
you got to win incrementally. You can't just win in big chunks the way we do in Commander.
Hmm.
And
No,
learning those increments is, I think, a real skill.
it really is. And we actually, I do a podcast, Constructive Criticism, which is all about helping people take this next step, really target at like local stores to like your RCQ, RC level. And we just did an episode this week on fundamentals. And we
Mm,
talked a lot about this, that like attacking and blocking, no matter what deck you play, whether it's control, mid range, aggro, maybe some combo decks are the exception, but basically you have to attack and block. Like they don't design cards without creatures anymore. Like even the control decks, they play that whale in standard from Worlds, right? So like you're gonna have to get in the red zone and you're gonna have to initiate in that, and you cannot avoid it. And it's really important that you understand that. And I think the thing that I typically tell people is in coaching, I have a mantra that's sort of winning and losing doesn't matter. Playing well and understanding why we made our plays is what matters. So a big thing that I really I think was like the biggest thing for Jessie was sometimes she would just make a play and she would just get got by these obvious things. And it wasn't that her play was even wrong, it was that she didn't think about the play, right? So it's like, oh, they had Bolt. And in reality, Jessie had to play her card. If they had Bolt, she lost, but like if she didn't, she was just going to lose anyways. And it's like, okay, it's less that you didn't make the wrong plays, that you didn't understand why it was the right play, which means in the future you're going to make wrong plays, right? And we can't walk into
mm,
this obvious stuff. And I think that is like a big thing that a lot of players never think about is like, oh, okay, it almost doesn't even matter if I win or I lose. All that matters is I'm making the most informed decisions I can that make the
yes.
most logical sense. Because if I play 1,000 matches, that's the best way to win.
Yeah, because one of the level up moments I had was I was
Mhm.
talking to like a pro, And they were like, look, man, you can play around what they have, or you can sit there and realize that it doesn't matter whether they have it or not, because you're not going to win if they do have that card. So you just got to play as if they don't have it and just go make the best plays you can. You can't live in fear of the thing you can't beat anyways. Like, you're going to lose to that card whether they have it or not. So you might as well do the best you can with the assumption that they don't have it. And if they do, make them show it to you.
Yeah,
and I was like,
and if you can beat it, then respect it, right?
Yeah,
like
of course.
that's the other, yeah, and that's the part too. Where
That's
I
a
think
corollary
people,
right there, right?
yeah, they can't. So people often go to extremes. The newest thing I'm trying to figure out how to make a lesson out, because we didn't get to talk too much, but in coaching I have like lessons or like
Oh yeah, we like totally glazed right past it, but this is a great talk.
No, you're of course, yeah. So I have like lesson plans and homework and all that sort of thing, but I'm trying to figure out how to make one that's basically the too long didn't read is heuristics are the killers of tournaments, in my opinion, where players use heuristics to answer questions.
They use them as handicaps.
Exactly. Yeah. And they should be things that are like when you're playing Turbo Magic, right? Like game 3, 4 minutes on the clock, we got to finish the round. That's a great time to use heuristics. You're super tired and you just can't think. Heuristics are a great time. Everywhere else, we should be thinking, and heuristics can be a good tiebreaker, right? But that should be what it does. It should be the straw that breaks the camel's back, not the thing guiding the camel.
Right. Like, you really got to look at the board state every time and be like, is this, like, what am I doing with the cards in hand versus what's on the table? You can't just be like, I have these 3 cards, I must play them in this order, no matter what they have, because you're just going to walk into death, right? Like, it's like, we can't play Robo Rally. We got to play Magic. We got to program ourselves to look at the board every time and change your mind based on what happened. That's part of why I have such a hard time with CDH, for instance, is because my makeup does not allow me to pay attention to 3 separate board states and focus on what everybody could possibly be doing at any given time and what their hands are and where the stack is 38 cards deep. I can't process that much, and I acknowledge that. So that's why I stick to the the lakes that I'm used to, right? It's like it's just there's understanding, especially though in one-on-one, you can definitely look at it and be like, if I play this card right now, I'm going to eat it from the Bowmaster I know that they've got in their hand. And you've just got to be able to, like, you can't make guesses or use shortcuts sometimes. You've just got to be able to play it out. Yeah, and that's a real challenge. So before we wrap up, I'm really curious though. You said lessons and homework. How does a coaching session work?
Yeah, so I mean, it really depends on where we're at and what we're doing. But let's go over sideboarding, for example, because that is the most common one and probably the one the listeners are probably most interested in. So sideboarding is something I pretty much work on with everyone. Every now and again, I have someone who understands it, and that's great. But basically, I will like work through them, kind of how I start to identify in a matchup what are the key cards, what are the cards that don't matter, how would I sideboard, and then importantly in this whole process, whenever you're sideboarding for a matchup, you should look at what the other deck is doing too, because you want to sideboard for your opponent's game 2 and 3 deck, not their game 1 deck.
Yes.
Right? So like a good example is most mid-range decks in Standard play a lot of kill spells, and then against a creature-less control deck, they cut them all. So sometimes it's okay to have your 1 creature. Normally it would just insta-die, you never get anywhere. Now they maybe left in 1 kill spell for your 1 creature. Maybe they have 2, right? And so now you're like, oh, I play Counterspell plus my, Baneslayer. It's going to go the distance, right? So like that's an example of like sideboarding for the post-board deck, where in game 1, you would never want that card. So, we go over that, and then I'll send them off to do homework. And so in the case of sideboarding, the homework is I have them go through the process for 5 to 7 decks, sort of depending on how they're feeling about the whole thing and how much they struggle. And then on the next session, we will go over it together and sort of talk through it. And I'll have them explain to me sort of what their process is, what's going on there, and then we'll work through it. And then
do you give them like specific matchups to try to figure out, or
I typically tell them to pick whatever deck they want, so that way if they need. So a big thing for me is I really want them to learn big picture stuff. Ideally for me, it's always work on big picture. I am sympathetic to a lot of people want some short-term stuff. So this is a way for me to compromise where it's like, hey, we'll work on your sideboard guide for your RCQ for your next tournament while also teaching you big picture stuff. So I have them sort of work on the deck they want to work on. I tell them just don't do vintage or whatever. I can do all the formats but vintage. And so, once again, vintage. And so I had them go over and do that, and then we work through it together, right? And then there are other little things, and I have other little lesson plans on like hand reading, and like I have whole scenarios that are like, okay, and now that we're here, tell me what you think is in that player's hand, what do you think is not in their hand, and what are some potential hands they kept on 7, right? And like that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's like that's the other thing. Is like mulligans are probably the other big moment of like, how do I know when I should mulligan this hand? Like I've got a Murktide in my hand, I've got 2 islands,
Mhm.
and I've got like that's it. What should I? An expressive iteration or something, right? It's like,
Yeah.
do I keep this? Do I throw it away? You know, like
Mhm.
I think mulligans are one of the most challenging parts of Magic because again, people don't want to throw away the like, oh, but if I get that one land, it's going to be the hottest hand in the world. I'm like, yeah, but you're also going to die if you don't get that one land in the next two
Mhm.
cards, right? So
Yeah.
you better
Yeah,
ponder.
it's always really funny too when people are like, "Well, I'm on the draw, so I can risk it," and it's like, well, if you're on
Mhm.
the draw, you don't have the talking stick, right? Like Magic, there's like the talking stick, and whoever goes first gets to say the first things. And let's say Shivam's on the draw and keeps his one lander, and I go turn one Ragavan, and he's like, land elf go, and I go bolt your elf hit you. And he's like, oh, I didn't draw a land, play an elf. And I go, bolt your land, elf, hit you, counterspell your next elf. Like, you're just dead.
Oh
Whereas
yeah,
if
that
you had
game's
Mulligan,
well and over.
yeah, if you had Mulligan and played 2 elves on turn 2, I maybe wouldn't connect to my Ragavan, right?
Yeah, or
I'd
you're
be
like
out of
Thoughtseize,
answers.
take your elf. Now what are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so many different things. I solitude your elf or whatever, right?
geez.
Like you know what I mean? Like there's just a billion things. And so actually having functioning hands
Dude,
is so important.
giving people a Swords of Plowshares on legs has got to be one of the biggest mistakes in modern Magic.
Giddy up.
The card is so good. It's so all
not
5
weak.
of those stupid cards are so good. Well, maybe
Yeah.
not the blue one. I don't think I've ever seen anybody play the blue one.
Well, the blue one,
No, the
it's
blue,
funny.
the black one.
The
No,
black
black
one's
one, grief, obviously.
Yes.
Sorry,
yeah.
my bad.
No, you're good. The blue one has actually gone up because it's the best one against the rest, right? If your opponent tries to put in a turn 1 grief, this is the best one against it. Because if you're both down, but then they have this sort of stranded card. So it's funny how originally, Subtlety was the lowest played one, and it's still probably the least played, but now it sees a good amount of play because the other ones are creeping up. Which is cool if they weren't all designed together, I think. If they were just 5 separate cards in Magic's history, I'd be like, that's dope. You can't tell me differently. The fact they're all designed together does
makes
make
it
me
a little
sad.
playing
Oopsie-doopsies.
Modern Masters block constructed is what I think Kibler calls it. It's just like, oh man.
I'll tell you what I tell people in coaching when it comes to them designing all these things. Hannah Montana is a great philosopher I believe in, and everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has those days. They made a little oopsie poopsie on Solitude Fury. It happens. We move on. It's same. With
endurance is pretty hot. Is all I'm saying. Endurance is pretty hot.
Endurance is great.
Yeah.
Not weak.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Modern Horizons, man. There's so many good, like my favorite cards from those were like the ninjas. The ninjas were so hot from the first Modern Horizons.
Ninjas are so cool. Yeah.
But in any case, this has been a really lovely talk. Thank you so much for joining me. I've actually learned a lot. This is really, really cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time coming on a Casual Magic again and talk about this stuff.
So if folks wanted to find you or ask you questions or see if you've got space for coaching, where could they go?
All right, here's the rundown. So you can go to twitter.com and my @ is Mason E. Clark, MASONECLARK. You can reach out to me for coaching via DMs there, or you can email me at masoneclark@gmail.com. Same exact thing, just with Gmail. Put coaching in the description. That way I don't think you're a spam person. I'm hopefully going to have a website soon, manifesting. It's going to work out. Everything's going to be good. And then you'll be able to use that. But maybe I'll have to come back to promote that. But you can find me there. You can find me each and every week on Constructed Chrism. If you're someone who sounds like you enjoy this sort of thing and you want to learn more about this stuff, or maybe hear me talk more about Magic, that is my weekly podcast that is focused on helping people who are at the local level take the step up to the RCQ or RC level. We are focused in on that, and it's me and 2 of my friends who have all played multiple Pro Tours and all have a very similar mindset to me. If you like me, you're probably like them. And you can find me each and every week writing for Card Kingdom, where I'm typically writing about some metagame thing in one of the formats. This week and next week, I'm writing about Doctor Who stuff because I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. So I'm really excited that I got to do that for a couple of weeks. That's going to be a fun change of pace. And then you can find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark, where I stream a fair amount, but not as much recently because I moved, but I'm hoping to get it fixed now that I'm in my house. I got gigabit internet. We're ready to go.
Let's
doing
go.
it. Yes.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as always, my friends, you can find me at Gearpuri Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays, thanks to my editor, EK. You can also find me on my other 2 podcasts, You've Been Wheeler Love Magic, or the Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast. And as always, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we'll see you next time.